Augusto Pinochet was born on November 25, 1915 in Valparaiso, Chile, into a modest family. His father was Augusto Pinochet Vera, a customs official, and his mother was Avelina Ugarte Martinez, a woman known for her discipline and strength of character. From the very beginning, Pinochet was raised in an environment that valued order, tradition, and authority. These values would later shape the man who would rise to become one of the most feared leaders in Latin America. He grew up in a Chile that was often torn between political instability and social unrest, a country where the military was seen as one of the few stable institutions capable of holding the fragile state together. As a child, he showed determination and resilience, qualities that marked him as different from his peers. His early years planted the seed of ambition that would grow into an overwhelming drive for power and control. Pinochet pursued his education in the military academy, enrolling at the age of 17. His choice was not surprising given the heavy influence of military order in his upbringing. The young cadet proved himself to be disciplined, hard-working, and committed to a life of service in the armed forces. In 1937, he graduated as an infantry officer, beginning a long career in the Chilean army. Over the decades that followed, he continued his military education, attending advanced courses and steadily climbing the ranks. He was known among his superiors as a man of detail, a soldier who valued planning and precision above all else. His writings and lectures during his service reflected a belief in strict authoritarian control and a deep suspicion of leftist ideologies. These views made him a natural candidate for leadership during a time when Chile faced growing ideological conflict. By the time the 1970s arrived, Pinochet had already carved out a reputation as a loyal servant of the state and a man who could be trusted in moments of national crisis. The path to power for Augusto Pinochet came suddenly, yet it was the culmination of decades of political turbulence in Chile. In 1970, Salvador Allende became president, ushering in a socialist government that sought to transform Chile with radical reforms. Land redistribution, nationalization of key industries, and increasing ties to communist nations alarmed many sectors of Chilean society, including the military. Economic turmoil and political polarization pushed the nation to the edge of collapse. By 1973, Chile was gripped by strikes, shortages, and violent street clashes. In this climate of chaos, Pinochet, who had recently been appointed as the commander-in-chief of the Chilean army, positioned himself as the man capable of restoring order. On September 11, 1973, the Chilean military, under his command, launched a coup against Allende. Tanks rolled into Santiago, the Air Force bombed the presidential palace, and the president took his own life as the armed forces seized power. Within hours, Pinochet emerged not merely as a general but as the head of a military junta. The coup was bloody and decisive, signaling the start of a brutal dictatorship. Pinochet consolidated his rule with ruthless efficiency. In the weeks following the coup, thousands of political opponents were arrested, tortured, or executed. Stadiums were turned into prisons, and secret police units hunted down dissidents. The military government justified its actions as necessary to save Chile from communism, but the price was immense human suffering. Fear gripped the nation, and silence became the shield of survival. Political parties were banned, the Congress was dissolved, and censorship suffocated freedom of expression. Yet alongside this iron fist, Pinochet pursued radical economic reforms. Guided by advisors known as the Chicago Boys, he embraced free market policies, privatized industries, reduced state intervention, and opened Chile to global markets. These reforms stabilized the economy, reduced inflation, and laid the groundwork for future growth, but they also deepened inequality, leaving the poor more vulnerable. Supporters hailed him as the man who modernized Chile, while critics condemned him as a tyrant who sacrificed human dignity for economic statistics. The dual nature of his rule created a paradox that continues to divide opinions even today. The bad deeds of Augusto Pinochet cannot be erased from history. His reign was marked by systematic human rights abuses that left tens of thousands scarred forever. Political opponents were disappeared, families were shattered, and fear became a permanent part of daily life. The National Intelligence Directorate, known as DINA, operated as a shadow force that carried out kidnappings, assassinations, and torture. Chile became a land where suspicion ruled and whispers replaced open speech. Internationally, his government became infamous for its brutality. Reports from human rights organizations painted a grim picture of a nation held hostage by its own leader. Yet despite global condemnation, Pinochet clung to power with an iron hand. His crimes were not confined to Chile alone. Under Operation Condor, he coordinated with other South American dictatorships to track down and eliminate political opponents across borders. These dark deeds ensured that his name would forever be linked to repression, violence, and bloodshed. Yet it is also true that Pinochet had achievements that some still defend. His economic reforms laid the foundation for what would later be called the Chilean miracle, a period of sustained growth and stability that distinguished Chile from many of its neighbors. He introduced pension reforms, modernized the banking system, and reduced the power of unions. Infrastructure improved, foreign investment flowed, and the middle class expanded in the decades after his rule. To his supporters, these achievements justify the harsh measures he took, painting him as a patriot who saved Chile from communism and chaos. To his critics, these so-called good deeds cannot erase the rivers of blood and tears that flowed under his government. The legacy of Pinochet remains contested, a battlefield of memory where his name is spoken with either pride or hatred. The downfall of Augusto Pinochet came not through violent overthrow but through the very system he created. In 1980, he introduced a new constitution that included a provision for a national plebiscite in 1988, designed to legitimize his rule. Confident in his control, he believed the people would vote to extend his mandate. Yet the Chilean people, weary of fear and repression, shocked the world by voting no. Democracy returned in 1990, and Pinochet stepped down as president but ensured himself a role as commander-in-chief of the army, keeping his grip on power. In 1998, his story took another dramatic turn when he traveled to London for medical treatment. There he was arrested under an international warrant issued by Spain for crimes against humanity. The arrest stunned the world, transforming the once untouchable dictator into a frail old man facing the weight of justice. Though he was eventually allowed to return to Chile on grounds of ill health, the years that followed were filled with legal battles and investigations. Augusto Pinochet died on December 10, 2006 in Santiago, without ever facing full trial for the atrocities committed under his command. His death was met with mourning by his supporters and celebration by his enemies. Even in death, he remained a figure of division, a man whose life cast a long and dark shadow across Chilean history. Augusto Pinochet remains a haunting reminder of how power can elevate a man to the highest throne yet drag him into the darkest abyss of human cruelty. His life was a story of ambition, betrayal, violence, and transformation, a tale where the lines between savior and tyrant blurred beyond recognition. The memory of his rule still burns in the minds of Chileans who lived through the years of fear, while the statistics of his economic reforms remain engraved in the ledgers of history. In the end, he was neither purely hero nor purely villain, but a man who embodied both extremes of leadership. The name of Augusto Pinochet will forever be spoken with both dread and awe, a reminder that power without limits can shape nations but also scar them beyond repair.